everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, aspiring author Jonathan Taylor. Today's video will serve as the closer for my How to Write month, and I will use it in order to explain how how one can conceptualize the emergence and development of various sports and games for the sake of integrating them into whatever story you want to write. Don't be surprised if the advice I will give will seem at least somewhat vague. In order to give it a bit more focus, I want to explain my definitions and the scope of my video. For the sake of the video, a game is any kind of rule-based, goal-oriented, collaborative activity requiring some little or no equipment, which aims to entertain its participants and maybe even potential onlookers. This should include stuff like hide and seek and ping pong, but also exclude stuff like diplomatic negotiations and political elections, which, while do fit some of the criteria, aren't really meant to be entertaining. A sport, by contrast, is a competitive, mostly physical, activity which takes place within a formalized setting and aims to assess the performance criteria of its participants. These definitions can become somewhat blurry, but I'm sticking with them. This video will not go into specifics about game design or about how prestige influences social change around this sport. You'll have to look into other sources for that. Partly because it's too specific, partly because it goes beyond the scope as I have defined it, or beyond what I would need to explain in order to allow you to create games and sports. So now let's take a quick detour into motivations, as in what compels people to develop games. The answer to that is actually surprisingly simple. As humans, we have an inbuilt need to come together to form societal groups and communities, and we do so by various joint activities and rituals through which we bond and through which we develop our relationships. Games are just one more way by which we can scratch that itch, and they also have the added benefit of, first of all, being deliberately meant to be entertaining, and they are more accessible than other such activities. It is easier to learn the rules of a game, even a complicated one, than it is to learn a mythology or a history. As such, games are one of the few truly universal parts of the human experience. How they manifest, however, varies quite greatly. There are two reasons for that. The first of which revolves around material availability. You won't expect societies without electronics to play video games, for instance, unless what they call video games is something completely different from what we call video games. Instead, they will develop games based on what they have access to, or what they can use towards that purpose. Pre-agricultural societies will just will develop games based on moving around and maybe searching for and finding certain things. They will use their environment in order to assess themselves and have their fun. For example, who can climb the highest, who can swim the furthest, who can run the fastest, those kinds of things. Agricultural societies will take elements from their environment that they can repurpose for the sake of entertainment activities. For example, kids taking a bull rope and then skipping it, or maybe making dolls out of wooden spoons, because yes, that is also a thing. And manufacturing-based societies will be able to create more specific, more specialized equipment for the sake of playing a game or taking part in a sport. But again, you have to look at, they will only use what they have available around them. Mining Town, for instance, will only be able to create balls that can be thrown and caught if they somehow trade for leather or rubber. They can, however, develop or create stone balls that they can use for example, for billiards or for bowling. That is a thing that can happen. The second reason for the wide variance of games is due to pre-existing societal influences. Remember around a decade ago when there was a big debate about whether or not video games are art? And then when we decided that they are and started critiquing them as such, a bunch of man-babies got really angry and we're still kind of dealing with the fallout of that? Yeah, it's kind of like that. I don't necessarily mean to argue that all kinds of games are art, but I will argue that all games are part of culture. They are reflections of the lived experiences of the people that create them and play them. And as such, any aspect that changes these lived experiences will also will also be reflected in the kinds of games that people play. Societies, for example, that are based around hunting will develop various games that are based on, chasing, monitoring, and touching or stopping targets, such as hide and seek or tag. Societies with more complex or layered social systems will develop games that that will also reflect this this layering. Games that will have more complex rules and that might require specialized equipment, such as a specific board. Chess, Go, the Royal Game of Heir, and Mancala come to mind as examples. Layered societies where this kind of layering starts breaking down, or more egalitarian segments within such a society, will play and develop more luck-based and gambling games. And merchant societies, where your ability to administer resources becomes important for your own success, will see a surge in both number and popularity of card games. And those are just some of many potential examples. Sports develop in pretty similar ways. However, the social influences that affect them either seep through much more slowly or need to be brought on through much more dramatic social events. You don't generally have the same flexibility when it comes to designing sports as you do when designing games. Keep in mind the definitions I mentioned at the beginning of this video. And in the definitions of sports, I mentioned that you need a formal setting in order to assess people's performance. A formal setting means that you require a specifically designated play area or match venue, which may or may not be difficult to maintain. You need specific equipment to perform with. There might also be restrictions when it comes to how long you can play, or what the aim of a given match would be, etc. You have to do a lot of legwork before you can actually say that you have developed a sport. It's not just like a game. And as such, in order to ensure legitimacy, in order to ensure that competitions take place fairly and are also somewhat interesting, both to play and maybe to see, then you need some kind of governing body that creates and enforces a specific set of rules. It is because of that sports really only develop once society has reached a certain level of centralization, and the citizenry generally also has enough disposable income, which they can use to spend towards refining their favorite pastime, as well as creating or organizing various venues where where these sports could take place. Because of the interest that these fields tend to gather, there will almost inevitably be a certain level of political interest that is embroiled in this. But as I said, I won't go into this. If you might be interested in that, then I will recommend my previous video on how to write political intrigue. With what I said there and what I've mentioned here, I think you should be able to create an interesting story should you decide to make a story that doubles both as political drama and as sports drama. For now, however, this video has come to an end. Thank you very much for your attention. If you enjoyed it, then please leave a like, and maybe also share it wherever you think people will enjoy it or find it useful. If you have anything you'd like to add to this conversation, then all I can say is go ahead, the comment section awaits your input. And if you want to see when my next videos drop, then I suggest you go ahead and subscribe. Maybe also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. Until next time, I'm Jonathan Taylor, and this has been the Heir's Lair.